Okay. Good afternoon, members, officers, and any members of the public who are viewing the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of the Joint Planning Advisory Group. My name is Councillor Katie Thornborough, and I'm the chair of this committee. I'm a Cambridge City Council councillor, and I will ask the members to introduce themselves, starting on the left with...
Good evening, Councillor Tumi Hawkins, Caldecott, South Cambridgeshire.
Peter Sandford, member for Caxton and Papworth Ward in South Cambridgeshire.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam from Milton and Waterbeach on the District Council. Thank you.
I'm Councillor Katie Porrer. I represent Market Ward in the City.
I'm Simon Smith. I represent Castle Ward in the City.
And we have a few members joining us online tonight. Shall we start with Councillor Bennett?
Good evening. I'm Councillor Naomi Bennett, Abbey Ward, Cambridge City Councillor.
Councillor Khan.
Hello, I'm Councillor Martin Khan. I represent Histon Ward, Histon and Impington Ward from the city, South Cambs.
Councillor Manning.
Hi, Ian Manning, Chesterton Division on the County Council.
And Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Hi, Beth Gardner-Smith from Romsey Ward in Cambridge City.
And we are also joined by Councillor Williams. Who?
Sorry, Chair, just a legacy from planning earlier that had to be resolved.
And the officers we have here, I'll ask them to introduce themselves from my left.
Stuart Morris, Team Leader in the Planning Policy Team.
John Dixon, Planning Policy Manager.
And Heather Jones, Deputy Director for Planning.
And Sarah Steed, Democratic Services Officer.
We have Erin Clark from Democratic Services, and online we have Stuart Morris to introduce it. Oh, you're there. Oh. Sorry, that's confusing. Sorry about that. Those in the chamber are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and to use the images and sound recordings for a webcast and archived recording. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. Agenda item 1, apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Lisa Redrup, and Councillor Martin Khan is attending as substitute. Are there any other apologies? No other apologies. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Please could councillors declare if they have any declarations of interest? Nobody in the room, no one online. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the Joint Local Planning Advisory Group held on the 24th of September 2025 are attached to this agenda, which are page 3 to 6 in the agenda pack. Are members happy to note those minutes?
Agreed.
Agreed, generally agreed.
I wasn't here, so
yeah.
Abstain.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Okay, that's noted then. Now Councillor Khan.
Simply to say the same, that I wasn't there, so I abstained.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 4 is one of our main items. It's the Greater Cambridge Local Plan Draft Stage Regulation 18 for consultation. The report can be found on pages 7 to 36 of the agenda. Jonathan Dixon, Planning Policy Manager, will present the report now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm not going to present this bit because I'm going to delegate it to Stuart Morris to present the first part. Thank you.
Thank you. So this agenda item is split into two parts. The first part relates to the communication strategy for the forthcoming draft plan consultation, which I will talk to. And then John's going to talk through the development management policies that have been summarised in the report that you have. And I suggest we probably split that into two. So in respect to the communication strategy, I should firstly apologise. So I'm not Lizzie Wood, who has led on this. So John and I will do our best, but I don't have all the background, but I'll do my best. So as discussed, I think last time, the consultation dates are proposed to start on the 1st of December and run through to the 30th of January. Recognising that Christmas is in the middle of that, we're proposing for it to be over 8 weeks, which is longer than the 6 weeks minimum. The list of items on the screen there shows you I guess the central documents that will be published, but I guess the key message is that a lot of work has gone into this draft plan. So there's, say, topic papers for each theme, that's 7 topic papers plus the strategy. And a lot of evidence supporting each of the development management policies and the sites in the plan. So I think there's going to be over 50 documents published, recognising that that's a challenge for people to take in, but also necessary in order to have robust evidence informing the proposed approach. I guess noting the challenge of everybody absorbing that wealth of information, we are putting together a communications and engagement strategy to try and ensure that we engage with people meaningfully. And we'll be seeking feedback on, people can comment on every single thing that we publish, and the proposed draft plan, which will be discussed and agreed by members via committee before that point. And so, yeah, everything's up for discussion or for feedback. We are trying to have, as well as all of the detail informing the proposed approach, a clear story and a kind of a headline story so people can understand the overview without necessarily going into all levels of detail or to kind of dip into the bits that they're really focused on, recognising that it is a challenge, but we are trying to kind of provide that summary and that headline, easy to read view as well as the detail. In terms of the methods by which we're proposing to use, you'll be familiar with all of these, that none of them are, I'm going to say rocket science, but it's trying to do everything. I guess in terms of the different platforms, the easiest way that we can take people's responses via is our web portal, because we can immediately kind of gather that and have it in a consistent form. But we recognise that we need to go much beyond that in terms of the different formats, so you can see the different communication methods on there. We are thinking and trying to be innovative to try and reach different groups, recognising that maybe traditionally a certain demographic responds to this kind of consultation, which doesn't include everybody. You can see the range of things talked about there to try and engage younger people and people with different interests, as say targeted sessions, underrepresented groups. I guess a point to note beyond the words put on there is noting the not ideal timings of going over Christmas. It mentions an opening night launch event. I guess the thinking is that starting on the 1st of December, there's maybe a week or so when you can kind of grab people, and then people's attention, including ours, probably naturally focuses on Christmas. So we're kind of aiming, I think, to maximise the kind of a big start and kind of get as much of that kind of interaction and in-person stuff at the start. Recognise that over Christmas that is not going to be the best use of time. And then again, towards the end of consultation into January, when people have maybe got their minds a bit fresher, to do that bit again. So it's kind of a two-phase in terms of that kind of in-person interaction. And I guess just noting, I guess you'll be familiar with the Cambridge Room as something that's come about since the last consultation, so that's an opportunity to make use of that as a kind of a third space where people can discuss things and come together. That's it. It's a pretty whistle-stop summary, but welcome any comments or thoughts or questions from members.
Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Porr after.
Thank you, Stuart. And I'm sure you've got this on your list of people to be contacted, but will you do a specific engagement with gypsies and travellers?
We have done that in the past. I think we are looking to do that again. It is always a challenge, so I recognise, so talking to the colleagues that did that last time, even when they went out to the site and went around to knock on doors, it can be challenging to get that response, but we need to try, so recognising,
There are strategic people that, particularly, I'm thinking about Fenroe Chesterton, which is in my ward, and there are specific people that we could engage with, and we can sort of find out what would be the best way to engage with them. I can do a bit of background asking, if you like, if that would be helpful, how they would most prefer to be engaged, as it were.
That would be brilliant, thank you. And I guess that principle really holds that you as local members know things that we don't and can help us reach groups that we can't. So we really welcome all thoughts like that. So yes, please.
Councillor Porr.
Thank you very much. I'm assuming we are going to ask people who fill in the consultation where they are, what their involvement is. You know, are they a developer? Are they a resident? Are they an interested party? Because again, it's interesting to know, you know, for example, if we get lots of support from people nearby and lots against from further away or vice versa, that obviously helps us weight them. I know we mentioned going out to schools. I'm thinking about also community colleges, so 16 to 18s, and also the universities. I mean, I appreciate, particularly in my ward in the city, obviously there's a lot of students from both universities, but I think they're a group we don't often hear from, and I think particularly around the housing issues. You know, we have found in the past, I think there's been quite a lot of waiting to maybe older and people who own houses, so it would be really useful to reach out, you know, CRC, all those kind of, and the village colleges and things like that. That would be really helpful. And obviously, I note that it's coming to scrutiny in a few weeks, so I'm hoping that both scrutiny committees will kind of keep an eye on what the other one's doing, and, you know, I'll be very happy, certainly, for any of South Cam scrutiny members to come and sit for our one, and I hope the same will be extended the other way. But thank you. I think it's just really important, the more information we can get about what people are saying, where they are. But I think universities, colleges and sixth form would be definitely something we would want in there, because I think our youth engagement team tends to be 16 below, I think. Not always, but be useful. Thank you.
I know that we've had interns from University of Cambridge, from School of Architecture and Land Economy, and I think the professors and tutors are very aware of the local plan and would like to do some special sessions with university-age students, but I think engaging with ARU is very important.
So I think, yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think, to me, it's a combination of we go places where people can come to us and find out more themselves, but also we need to go places where people already are and try and get that cross-section of views to make sure we're given the opportunity. So certainly we've already had discussions around students within the team how best to access the university, including with the example you mentioned, Councillor Thornborough. But we will take those away, and yes, we will be working with our youth engagement unit to get the best way in as well. So hopefully we can put together a package that picks those issues up.
Okay, we have Councillor Williams, and then we'll come back to Councillor Bradnam, and then we'll go to the members online.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions through the report. I just want to clarify. First of all, on page 18, paragraph 2.3, I wasn't quite sure. It says the word removed, but I wasn't quite sure if something was missing, because it sort of said to be addressed by other policies, and then the sort of a line missing, and then could be 2 paragraphs removed, so a briefing provided. So I wasn't quite sure there of what had happened. The other one is on page 9. It refers to a telephone number, which I think would be a positive thing. But I just, you've put in the email address, but not the phone number. And I was actually wondering how that works, because is that going to go through to the standard call centre and then have to be sort of rediverted? So how's that fun? Or are we going to have somebody there that's going to be briefed on the local plan that's up to date and can provide that support? And the reason that I'm focusing on the telephone number is, and throughout the report, I think we're really good at reaching out actually to do youth engagement. We've obviously collectively done a lot of work on that and other things, but actually it's for those people that are not online that we suffer with the most. And this local plan has to work for everybody at both ends, and hopefully us in between as well. So I certainly don't feel that I feel into the youth category as I did when I first got elected, but it is something that worries me. Is rightly we focus on certain areas, but we've got to go across the board. But also neurodiversity, things like dyslexia and the like. It's really difficult to actually be able to engage and take part in some of these consultations, because even the way they are laid out is not accessible. The telephone is not the only answer, but I really would appreciate if that could be looked into. And also, it does sometimes feel, I know there's a lot of papers to go through, and I appreciate what you're saying about the summary, but the terminology, I think all of us, whether you're a councillor or an officer, can fall into that trap of we use a lot of jargon and things like that. The more accessible that language can be, the more inclusive it is for everybody. And I think while we've made efforts in the past, I don't think we've quite gone to the extent we need to be able to bring in people, particularly people from non-academic backgrounds. And we still have, in a lot of our more rural areas, people that are still in non-academic sort of manual jobs, farming, etc., and manufacturing in some cases. So I think it's really important, and I'm sure there's places in the city as well where that would be applicable. It's just not an area I'm obviously more familiar with, the rural side of things. And also the accessibility. It's okay putting these things on, but particularly for older people, they might not have the transport. So I think we need to look as well about not just, quite often we go to the more urban places because we think there's more people, and that's great for those pop-up events, but it does alienate those people that can't get there. And lastly, Chair, just on the notes that I've made, as you can probably tell, I'm starting to lose my voice, which some people may be very pleased about. One thing that I've noticed in the past is how much councillors and our parish councils and residents will come to us. Something comes through, I can guarantee you when I go to the parish council meeting and they've got it on their agenda, I'm going to be asked, what's this all about? As fantastic as the summaries may be and everything else, I'm going to be asked that question. Now, when it's a planning issue, that's great. We're on planning committee, we're up to date, we're fine. If it's sometimes maybe a committee that I'm not on, then it's a little bit harder. And I don't know what the numbers are in city, but there's 11 out of 45 of us on planning committee in South Cambs. So I think before, and this is the thing, it can't be at the same time, before this goes out into the public, we need proper engagement with district councillors so they know exactly what the questions are. And that's the thing for me when I'm looking through this. I want to see the questions. I want to know what it's going to look like visually as well, to look at those accessibility things. But I feel that we need to make sure, and in-person workshop, whatever form it needs to take, hybrid, we need all of our councillors, whatever role they've got, to be fully prepared before this goes out, because it's Christmas and it's going to be tough, but we need everyone to engage.
I know last year there was special training set up for every councillor and any other person who was interested with, and then had information so that if you were going to any residents meeting or out, you had the information to explain about the consultation. I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. You give me a lot to go through. The first one, in paragraph 2.3 of the report, several people today have pointed out that and I've looked back at the versions, I'm struggling to reconcile it. To be honest, I think if you delete those 3 superfluous lines, it's trying to repeat a similar point that actually already ended up in paragraph 2.3, because I can't track it back through the versions. I think it's an error in formatting, to be honest. You raised a number of great points on the consultation. So on the phone number, I didn't put a phone number in this particular summary, and I'll be really honest about the reason is I'm trying to make sure I give the right number. Now, my preference is going to be that we give a number that goes directly through to my team, which I think we'll be able to do. But I didn't want to give the wrong number in this report and then put a different number in a different report. So that's the simple reason for that one. The other thing we definitely will do, so as well as giving a number for our team, we absolutely need to brief the contact centres, because there are many things people will go straight to them. They need to know the consultation in the first instance, but there are some simple things where they will be able to give a straightforward answer and deal with questions direct. So, how do I find the website? How do we? There are the things we want to brief the contact centre on. But we also want to make sure if someone's got a more complex answer, they can get to us. So that's a key part of it. Absolutely about the digital and people who aren't online. That's something we grapple with during absolutely every consultation. So we can't ignore that paper is still important. And our challenge is the volume of information now involved in these consultations makes that difficult. But we're trying to balance that issue through the package of measures we'll be coming up with. We are working on making sure we've got a sort of not executive summary, because that's the wrong phrase already, that's a grand term in itself, but a summary of what is the plan trying to do, what's its story, and trying to put that in a way we can message that so that someone hasn't got to grapple with the planning language that at this stage of the process we have to do. So ultimately this is a complex policy-driven document that needs a story at the front to say what it's doing so people can comment on that story. We will also need to make sure we go across the whole of Greater Cambridge, which again is difficult because it's a very big place. So I suspect what we need to do is put together a programme where we go to a variety of places and try and get good coverage, and also probably focusing on the areas which are most affected. That's the natural way of doing it. But always trying to seek that balance of getting to the city centre, some of the city neighbourhoods, some of the larger villages and some of the smaller villages as well. We'll be about that package, but we can't go everywhere, but we'll try and be as many places as we can. We are going to produce member packs, so you've not just got a briefing, you've got something written, say, frequently asked questions, come to us if someone asks you this, we can give more information on that and so on. And we will, I'm sure, do a member briefing as well. Accessibility, we are on it. It's a real challenge. So we've got a graphics designer trying to make the document very visually accessible. We've got on the IT side of things, trying to make sure the document's capable of being used, screen readers, all those things as well. And we'll be looking at the material that accompanies the consultation. We are still trying to make the online version very accessible, because as much as we need to address all audiences, we need to make the online version easily accessed in terms of being a digital web tool, not just here's a PDF. So we're working very hard on that as well. So really useful feedback. I think I can say we're trying to do all those things. It's how we pull together the package is going to be our challenge going forward.
And can I just add to that as well, picking up your point about the ability of our colleagues to talk about the local plan. We will be doing training with members of the housing team, the communities team, so they can be our voice as well. So it won't just be the planning service, and that call's already gone out to both leadership teams to make sure that, you know, all of our colleagues are going to be available to help in this space, because they will have a lot of contact as well. So,
do you want to come back, Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I know lots of work's going into it. It was just on the sort of neurodiversity, particularly for things like dyslexia and dyspraxia, just simple things. For example, sometimes I have to just change the colour of the background. Taking into consider those things, is it a light background with dark text, or is it the other way around? Trying to give people as many, you can't have the whole rainbow of colours, but and also the challenge between vertical and horizontal, which doesn't really get spoken about unless you're struggling it. People can be naturally a sort of a horizontal thinker, imagine a spreadsheet, and can think very much left to right. Other people top down. And so some consultation things I've seen, it allows you to select. So if you've got, say, 0 to 10, it will allow you to either have it left to right or top to bottom. And I can't tell you how small things like that make a huge difference. It's not, it's not that we need pictures. It's actually we just need people to do things in typefaces to give us a variety of options. So can I ask that you have a look at that, please? Thank you.
I think that's good advice for all consultations. Okay, so we have Anna, Councillor Bradham, and then we'll go to online.
Thank you. It's a similar item. It's just when assuming people will, you obviously do want people to use the website where possible. So can I ask that, sometimes you go onto the website and there's an absolute welter of documents. So can I ask you whether you have considered doing a sort of navigation, a route map through the documents? So it might be, if you've only got 5 minutes, or if you've got a whole afternoon, it might be, if you want an easy read version, it might be just to show a route. If you want to know the key information, we suggest you look at this, followed by that, and then if your main interest is the city, go this way. If it's to a village, a particular village, go that way, and if it's to rural areas, go another way. It's just to give people a suggested route through the documents on the website.
Thank you.
If possible.
Jonathan?
So I was just conferring again, because our expert unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening unexpectedly, but we are looking at various things. I'm going to say the word story map, and I'm not an expert on that, but I'm told it's one of the ways we will use to navigate through the document, alongside, as I say, trying to produce a sort of story of the plan. What's it doing? What are we trying to achieve? What are the key issues it's trying to address? What is the strategy for the area? And what are some of the key headline policy approaches we're proposing? Because I know planning policies, when they're written, it does ultimately become legal documents. So a lot of the policies are in legal speak, and that's unavoidable at the stage we're at. So it's about how do we tell the story of so someone can understand the story of what we're trying to achieve without someone having to understand some of the lovely wording planning committees and so on get involved in.
Thank you. We'll go to, we have Councillor Manning first, and then Councillor Bennett, and then Councillor Khan.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. Just to follow up on the point that Councillor Bradnams and Councillor Williams made, I'm guessing we're WCAG compliant, so Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, because that does include the points they've mentioned. So I guess can we just confirm that? Not that I want to be parochial, but Fenro Cheston is also in my division as well as Councillor Bradnam's division. So echo her point about Gypsy River Travellers. There's a number of local meetings they attend, so I can pass those on to officers, pass a couple of local contacts on. I didn't see it in the documents anywhere, but will we be doing some sort of pop-up event at Cambridge North Station? Because that's kind of an obvious point for catching people who will find, because lots of people coming back from via Cambridge North Station will be working hours that mean they wouldn't get to lots of other consultation. So I put a link in the chat about, I think we just need a general bit of updating of the Greater Cambridge Planning website, because a lot of it, there's no reference to the sewage works decision or non-decision on there, so it kind of needs just a little bit of updating, because it looks all a bit like back to 2023 at the moment. I'm I probably missed this in your report, so apologies, but I don't see any references to some of the larger employers in the area. I'm thinking particularly of who I work for, Cambridge University Press and Assessment. They'd be definitely keen to host something, AstraZeneca, etc. There's a few large ones which might catch a whole bunch of people you wouldn't otherwise catch. Final point, I'm not 100% clear on the remit of this meeting because I had a specific question about why Cambridge Science Park North isn't included in the local plan. So is that something that can be addressed here? Because I really think it should be in the local plan. It's going to be a major employment, major potential green space and community facilities in there. So yeah, if you could address those points through you, Chair.
Yes, you can ask all those questions. I'll hand them over.
In terms of the web standards, we are absolutely working with our communications team who have very clear requirements of us in terms of the standards documents and text must meet. I'm pretty confident it would involve said standard, but it's not really my area, but I'm confident we are responding to the requirements that are set out in terms of government requirements for websites. You mentioned potential venues and visits, so we're still looking at where we might perhaps visit. We don't have a defined programme. We were just noting between Stuart and I, we have in the past gone to Cambridge North Station, and it wasn't the most successful place to consult because mainly people were running past us trying to avoid taking a leaflet while they went and caught a train. So I'm not saying no, but we haven't had a good experience with that being the ideal place to go. Maybe supermarkets
Yes,
instead.
sorry, Jonathan. I think I was suggesting that the ideal, I know this is going to be very antisocial for you, but the ideal time to catch people will be late in the evening when they're coming back, not going. So yeah, I completely appreciate it.
I'm happy to look into that one. Yes, we're all a bit scarred by that particular attempt. Then we've got large employers, I think was the next one. So yes, so I have to say over the last few months I've been contacted by a number of groups, not just employers, but groups like CPPF and others saying, can we engage with their wider memberships through the consultation? I think we'll look at one of the package we might want to do is offer to go along to some of these wider groups like Cambridge Ahead or CPPF or groups, and that could be part of the package, I guess, how we reach out to some organisations. In terms of Science Park North, so that's one of a large number of sites that have been put to us through our call for sites. And when we go through our scrutiny processes and the draft plans and so on, clearly the councils will be receiving a draft plan and the selected site and so on to put together the plan to consult. So that's not an item for today's meeting, but clearly the approach to sites and then which sites are in which site will very much form the focus of the consultation going forward, and a chance to comment on those.
Thank
Chair,
you.
can I just...
Do you want to come back, Councillor Manning?
Yeah, can I just quickly, I suppose could I just, the bit that was missed is just about updating the website, because there's lots of there's no reference to the sewage work decision. But just on that specific point, can you just explain how, at what point is the decision made to include or not exclude sites? I mean, is there a single point?
Sorry, the draft plan, having considered all their representations and the call for sites and so on, will report to the scrutiny committees which are coming up with Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire members, and then the cabinet meetings, and that will put out for public consultation to get views on the selection of sites going forward, to receive views that then reported back to the member process for consideration.
Okay, so we have Councillor Bennett now.
Thank you. I just have three very small points. The first one is I couldn't actually find the agenda notes on the website. On the City Council website, it just has the 2021 meetings. And I felt that was a pity. I mean, obviously I had the agenda that was emailed to me, but there's quite a useful summary of what's actually in the plan that might be useful to people who are preparing to scrutinise. So I just wonder if we can make sure that the agenda is somewhere that's actually conspicuous on the website. I don't know why it isn't there, but maybe somebody could have a look at it.
Councillor Bennett, it's this committee is run by South Cambridgeshire District Council, so it's not on the City Council website, it's only on the South Cams website.
The previous JPLAG is actually on the City Council website as well. I just think we have a lot of people in Cambridge. I don't think they're going to be looking at the SCDC website. So that's point one. Point two was a plea for any printed documents to be have a reasonably large minimum print size. And the reason for that is that people whom we're likely to need to show a paper copy to are the people who are digitally excluded. And we know from the statistics they're often older people who have vision issues. And the third one is whether we could have a separate document that is a glossary and 3-letter acronym list that people could have open while they're looking through the main paper version. That could be a separate document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I'll just maybe quickly hand over to Sarah Steed from Democratic Services regarding the City Council website and diary and the South Cams one. So.
I'm quite happy to liaise with City Democratic Services to ensure that there's a current link included on their joint planning advisory group membership. I suspect it's been set up to show which city members sit on the advisory group rather than it being used to publish agendas, but I'll pick that up outside of the meeting to ensure there's a current link to the South Cams website. That's okay, Jess.
Also, Councillor Bennett, it's the same with the Cambridge Joint Area Committee, which is run by the County Council, but some city councillors are on that. It's a very similar situation. But I'll hand over to Jonathan now with the other questions.
So I think the second point was about hard copies. So we do produce hard copies. And again, it's all about balance in terms of how many and where. We do certainly deposit them at the Cambridge Main Library and other libraries if they request them. Often they don't want them. So we've previously, one of the other things we do is we produce a poster and we ask the libraries to display the poster and we give the librarian information about the plan, the consultation, and if someone requests a hard copy, we'll provide them. But often if a librarian is asked, can I see the plan, they're so digital now, they will put it on one of the computers and so on. So it's all about finding that really careful balance between cost, benefit, supporting who wants one, who doesn't, but we will try and weave our way through it. But I completely agree the point that there does need to be some hard copies and people, if they need them, need to be able to see them. On your glossary point, completely agree. We are producing glossary. We've had people go through the document trying to spot words that as non-planners they might not have understood. So we're on that one as well. But if there are words we've missed during, we can hopefully add further glossary words as well as people ask us, maybe not keeping it too live, but if there are things come up, we can add them.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to continue with the online members and then come back to the room. So we have Councillor Khan.
I'm probably the only councillor here who has actually been involved as an officer in doing a public consultation exercise. It's a long time ago, different era, no internet, no email or anything like that. It was in the 1980s, but we had public meetings, and I think my feelings about it might actually have some context. I found that when we did the consultations, it was difficult to get the numbers up. To get an informant, you needed a very brief general presentation, something really easy and basic you can understand, not technical at all. Which then, if you want to go into more detailed matters, that you can get to them. I mean, people were basically interested in the broad idea, but even more interested in what happened around the corner from them. What's happening at the end of the road. So they will ask you questions about may ask you questions about the general issues, and that's something they need to understand. But they will also ask you detailed consultations about what happens right there next door to them and the plot next to them. So that second side, of course, you have to respond to on the spot, but it's difficult with a plan which is much more general. The development boundary, which framework boundary, which is not really going to be covered by this plan. I don't know how you're going to tackle that, but I think the emphasis I would make is on that you need to get the maximum for the general public. I'm not talking about the technical advisors who will go through it with a tooth comb. You need to have a very general presentation, really overall outline, leading perhaps referring on to the other consultations, which are if somebody's really interested in something, they can get involved in. But that general presentation must be really easily understood and not have any technical language in it. Otherwise, you'll be lost as much as possible by a general map or diagram. That's how I found it in any case. I don't think that will be different for online consultations either. I mean, I think that the same principles would apply when you're dealing with members of the general public. That's my thoughts. I don't know how you can respond to how you might be putting that into practice or what will be put into practice.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Do you want to come back on that, or is it kind of quite interesting?
I think it's good advice, and yes, certainly we would aspire to do all of that and provide a summary that people find accessible. So yes, we'll give it a good go. Councillor
Manning, are you coming back in now?
Just a very quick point, Chair, just to back up Councillor Bennett's point. I think it's simplest if you Google the name of this meeting in Cambridgeshire, you get about 4 or 5 redundant links. Some of those are external websites. So I think it'd just be if officers have got the time, in the simple case of just contacting all those links and getting them to update them, because the actual right link is about the 4th or 5th down the list. So I think Sarah said you'd probably do something along those lines, but I think that's the simplest way of clearing up the confusion.
Thank you. We'll have Councillor Bradnam now and then Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I know many of our parish councils are very much online these days, but it's just remotely possible that they might want a hard copy to look at their bit in particular. So will it be obvious that parish councils can request a hard copy if they want one?
I think the answer is yes. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. 2 things, because Councillor Bradnam just reminded me of something else. So I'll start with that first. When it comes to parish councils as well, often the feedback is this is designed for an individual to fill in, not for a group. Part of that is actually they do need hard copies, because I hate to break it to everybody, but I sit there with no phone signal, let alone internet, in some of my parish councils and meetings. We might be the biotech capital of the world, arguably, but when it comes to phone signal, we're in the dark ages at times. So hard copies for parish councils are really important, but also we need 2 types, not just for parish councils, but for groups and organisations, because we need something where they can actually come to a viewpoint. I'd actually say sometimes as well, sort of tick boxes is easier for a group to agree on than sort of free-form text, because then everyone starts piling in. And again, I think we had one consultation, I think I sat there for 3.5 hours, and bless them, they really were trying. They tried really hard and they got to the end, but so often they were really struggling, and I just think it puts people off. And particularly where in the more harder to reach areas, actually making sure that at least if you get sort of 5 from each parish, from the parish council, that'd be a start. The other thing was the word glossary was used earlier, and I agree with that, but also on the accessibility, less is more. but you may need to put more in. So what happens is people think, oh, we need to explain it. So they put a big chunk of text with what it is and then the explanation. Have it completely separate. If people want the extra information or need that, they click on a short link to do that and then come back. And it's not just technical words. So I'm going to use some words that come up earlier on. A resident said about dangerous. Was it, Councillor Hawkins, unduly hazardous was the technical term. I'm going to make a confession. I looked up the word unduly. I have a degree and everything else. I wouldn't describe myself as a non-academic person or something. And I was right, but I just wanted to double check before I opened my mouth and said something wrong. And I know, and that's not an easy thing to actually admit, but I bet there's lots more people that have that moment when they think, oh, hang on a minute, I really just want to double check that I understand this. So it's not just the technical words. We need to make sure that if we want people to engage with this, the plainer the English, and if not, you click on the words and say any words that are anything confusion, click on the words and it'll give you the dictionary definition. Stuff like that, if you've got dyslexia or those sorts of things, God, that would make our lives so much easier. And hopefully no one will ridicule me for wanting to double check the word unduly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams.
It was highways, by the way.
So, on the final point, the way we've done it in the last consultation was not only having the glossary, it was that tool where you hover over a word. Is that what you mean? I think that's still part of it.
You can, or if it's not always, sometimes the sort of more detail, or if you want to see this policy or whatever it is, have a link to it, rather than what we end up is each question becomes a paragraph, which if you've got neurodiversity, it's sometimes very difficult to then see where the question actually is. So a short question, if need be, a link to a further explanation, but the shorter the better, so then we get the best quality and the more reactive response.
The other challenge we have is, I think we might have mentioned at the last meeting, because this is, in effect, the third consultation in this plan, and it's the consultation before we potentially say, this is the local plan we would like to potentially submit. So ultimately it is a collection of planning policies with some hopefully very clear explanation and story. So we can do a lot of what we discussed, but ultimately the purpose of this is to consult on a draft plan, so we'll have to balance that out. In terms of some of these ideas about questionnaires and so on, we're going to have to push some of the groups, particularly like parish and so on, that we want to know what you think about the policies and the sites that are proposed and so on. So we're certainly giving a lot of thought how we can engage the consultation in that, but that's the constraint we're working around, that we're trying to make the best of, having got to that quite technical point, but it's not in any way dismissing those points being completely valid, but that's the constraint we're working in, and we will do our best.
I just want to say that generally local plan consultations across the country receive about 300 or 400 responses. The last consultation we had 9,000 responses, because we had all of the points that you've been raising today have been discussed before the previous consultation. So the service works really hard at reaching people, and really is exemplar. It's never going to be the best, but we do need to go out. And the other thing is the training that the councillors had last time. Not many people came. I know Trumi, I think I did 7 presentations, and I know Trumi also used the information pack and went out and presented. But I think we were actually the only 2 who actually used the training and the information pack that we had. So we definitely would like to encourage people, because it makes it, we've got to go to where people meet to tell them about it. We can't expect them to come to us. But we just have to do as much as we can. but I think all of this input is really important. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Just to add to that, yes, we had, I think the last time we had member packs. Every single member had a pack. And yeah, barely used. I was still getting colleagues asking me for officers to come and talk to. I was like, you've got something. You use it. Good. I'm glad to hear that. But the point is, we as members also have a role to play. And we must play that role. We can't expect all officers to be at every single parish council meeting or wherever it is we want them to. I stood in, at Morrison's one Saturday, handing out leaflets, getting people to fill in the forms and just respond. Because that's where people go to shop. We went to people. I didn't go to the city centre. I can't remember why I didn't, but there was a time when they went to the city centre, right? It's us actually going out there to say, we're doing this. Come and talk to us. And, I will encourage each one of us to encourage the rest of our colleagues to play our part. This is teamwork, folks. Officers have so much work to do. I know there's a lot of ask here today, but can we please bear in mind that we're not going to reach everybody. We'll do the best we can. We'll put in as much work as we can to make sure that the information is simple to understand and people are able to access it simply or quickly. But it's not going to be everything that we're talking about today, folks. There's a balance that we need to reach. But we also have a role to play as members.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We have Councillor Williams and then Councillor Manning.
Just to give some reassurance, the member pack, I did read, I did find it helpful. I'm notoriously known for reading everything actually to the infuriation, I think, sometimes of members of the council. And what I'm feeding back is my experience of that last time. What I found, because as a group leader, I had members of my group ask me questions as well, because I'm the one that reads the pack. But that's my feedback from that experience. I think a much more interactive, because it was good. It was very detailed. It was very technical. I felt like I was ready to use it for planning committee, and we're used to it. But I think for members that aren't in planning and aren't in our own little sort of bubble within the bubble, I think it was hard for them. So that's why I'm trying to say for this. And that's, I sat there for like 3 hours, the parish council. It's from that experience. And I think it's that group representation. It's really difficult. But yeah, absolutely. And, I've always encouraging my parishes to take part. If you don't, the answer can be no sometimes. You might not get what you want. If you don't say it in the first place, we're not Houdini, you've got crystal balls. And that doesn't matter what party, what council, wherever you are. So I do agree. But to reassure officers, some of us did read it.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And I've read it because I find the lines. Councillor Manning.
Just as someone who also reads documents, when and where do we get this training?
The schedule will be coming out when we finalise things like which shopping centre we're going to, which schools, which locations, and the training. So it would be for the consultation.
Right.
When the documents are all finalised, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think, Councillor Williams.
Maybe what you were saying, maybe it's worth putting an ask out to councillors to ask them to volunteer to help with some promos, because I would come and help with that, or with schools so you've got multiple members. But perhaps we need to actively ask. I'm sure there are members that are willing to be more involved. They just might not realise that's a possibility.
So when we have the list of events and venues and the training, that would be a good time to ask. Yes, all the help, the better. I think we'll now move on to the next item on the agenda. It's with regard to the policies. So at the last meeting, there was a ask for looking at least a high-level review of where we are on the policies, and there's a paper about that. So I'll hand over to Jonathan or Stuart.
This one's me. Thank you. So, as we've talked about at the last meeting, when we started this plan, I think we very quickly landed on this concept of there being 7 key themes to the plan. I should stress this isn't the only part of the plan. So what we've got here is effectively what we're describing as the development management policies under those key 7 themes. But the plan will also include a strategy section, which will effectively be the element which identifies what are the needs of the area, what are the strategies for meeting those needs, and where are those needs going to be met. And that section also includes some policies similar to those in the current plan. So that strategy chapter will include things like the settlement hierarchy and the development frameworks and all those issues you've perhaps not seen in these particular chapters. So we consulted back in the first proposals on a clear set of potential policies that would be included under these themes. And as has been mentioned, we received an awful lot of feedback. We reported that feedback to previous versions of this committee. And in the meantime, officers, as you would expect, have been developing those approaches into policies, updating the evidence, keeping track of changes to national policy and guidance, and monitoring changing circumstances. So in the agenda pack, we've tried to provide an overview of the set of policies that we've been developing, and in some cases that's involved splitting some of the policies we proposed in the first proposals into to cover new issues, or we felt it would be more effective, and in some cases we've combined them and no longer having a policy on that issue. We've tried to explain that in the note, including in the missing paragraph point. That was what that was about. I won't dwell on these because they're really covered in the note, but going very briefly through the themes, we've got the full set of policies that were anticipated in the first proposals. We've included a new holistic policy at the beginning to set out a very clear overarching view about how we expect development proposals to respond to climate change. We've drawn out more clearly some of the issues around managing water and the approach to supporting the circular economy more clearly as well. I'm going to these quite briefly, actually. On biodiversity and green space, we've actually stuck with the original set of policies that were proposed, but they're quite comprehensive and cover a number of issues under each of them. In well-being, we had a policy of creating healthy new communities, where we've really drawn heavily on some of the work that's been done at county level on how to create healthy places. We've drawn out policies about meeting the needs of new communities, so it's been split almost into policies about how we'll react if new facilities are put to us as planners or as planning committee, but also a policy that seeks to make sure that new places think about and respond to the needs of places. So we've split that into two. We've perhaps in the meantime, since first proposals, done a lot of work on culture, including developing a cultural infrastructure strategy, and the City Council has developed a cultural strategy. So we felt we actually needed a standalone policy now on culture. That's probably the most on that one. And then on great places, we've drawn out some of the policies more clearly. So, for example, we've also got a new skyline and tall building study, which builds on the work as well we've done on producing a 3D map for the city as well. So there's a lot of new policy content in there. And then in Great Places, some of the issues we felt we needed to draw out more from the first proposals was more specific theme policies, particularly around heritage. So it's a bit more of a longer list. We felt we'd over-summarise that into the policies in the first proposals. On homes, I think we had a pretty comprehensive list of policies from the first proposals. I've missed over jobs. It's missing. I seem to have missed jobs. So I'll do jobs from memory. We've added in a whole set of policies here. So you've got the comprehensive approach to policy areas you'd be familiar with working on planning committee, about receiving proposals for new employment where would be appropriate. We've developed further the policy about protecting existing business space, particularly looking at the need for industrial space and the importance those spaces are now playing in the city and how best we can protect those remaining spaces. We've developed further the concepts around affordable employment space. So how do you spread the benefits of growth? And we've looked at some of those visitor accommodation issues and so on as well. On the homes, new policies, we're getting more proposals looking at things like co-living, which I think in my simple terms is almost looking at a form of student accommodation that's used for people who are actually in work, but a similar type of accommodation. So we felt that needed a standalone policy, but we felt the community-led housing was more appropriately covered by covering it in other elements of the other policies. So not covering it, but incorporating it to other policies. On infrastructure, we've perhaps developed the plan a bit further, looking at travel hubs more specifically, and issues of servicing and last mile delivery. So how do you get goods off lorries and around our communities in a more effective way? And then a standalone policy on construction management. And that's it. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I didn't want to repeat too much that was in the written document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll have Councillor Bennett and then Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Porra.
Oh, thank you very much. Sorry, it's echoing a bit. This is all really good. I think I make clear last time, it would be really helpful if this committee could see the draft. I appreciate we're really tight on scrutiny, but I'm also really aware I chair one of the scrutiny committees. They're not planning members, or only 2 of us are. And, you know, a lot of people have interest in the site, obviously, but, you know, I think our role here is to look at those policies. So what I wanted to do, I just wanted to run through a few questions for the bits I haven't seen in here that I thought were coming forward. So the first one was Airbnb or other available type short-term lets. I know on JPLAG in 2023, I think there's a relatively cross-party, cross-council agreement that needed to be addressed. So, for example, looking at the 90-day restriction that they have in London, and I haven't seen that here. And so I would really encourage that to come forward. The other big thing we had previously was the stepping of infrastructure relating to, so, you know, if you build out 100 homes, you then have to build the school, and then you can't go forward unless the water is provided. Obviously, we made some steps forward with the water. We're now making some slightly further back in terms of the Anglian water objections. So is that something we are still implementing? Because I think that's something where we have led the country in having these hopefully relatively robust things where we can say to a developer, well, no, you can't sell those houses until you've done the bit that was one of your condition discharges. Active frontage I want to mention. You mentioned shop front, but with the Class E, one of the things I worry that we have lost is this idea in the city, but to be fair, I think in villages as well, that when you are building, you need an active frontage. It keeps the safety, it keeps the lights. That, I don't know if that is in there somewhere. Heat zoning, there's a national requirement to connect, I believe, coming forward. Is that something you are covering? Adopted streets, my other bugbear, which I have to say, we've got county councillors here, we need the county also to adopt streets, but do we have a plan that is sort of making it clear that we would really prefer streets to be adoptable, so that we don't have these private management companies potentially charging rates that are above they should. And my final one is, we have had issues in the city with college accommodation coming forward, where in effect quite a lot of it is for postdoctoral, basically for workers. And I hope we were going to see some strengthening of that, so that when a college comes forward and says, oh, there's no amenity space, there's no balconies because it's for students, and then it turns out that 50% of the year it isn't for students. So again, I just hope that that could come forward. So I apologise, it's highlighting what's missing rather than all the good things that are there, which I take as read, as are very positive. But I also hope that you will be able to share with this group the full details and take representations from us, even if within the timescale we can't have a separate meeting. Because I think that is so important, because we are all planners. As Councillor Williams says, we all read all the small print, and we will be the people making judgments on these policies. And if they're not worded right, is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan?
The short answer is yes. So I've been going through ticking, have we covered them? But visitor accommodation, yes, including we've carried out a visitor accommodation needs assessment. One of the things you'll see that does is actually explore the quantity of short-term lets, effectively, to gather data on that. We are still, I'm probably going into too much detail, but we are still limited in some ways by the use class change hasn't come in, but we've covered the issue, and you'll have to comment when you see the document whether you think, obviously we've covered it enough. Phasing infrastructure, yes, covered in infrastructure theme. I hope that would be what you're looking for. Active frontages, yes. So the retail work, we're having to do quite a lot of adaptation because there's been a lot of change in national policy on retail. But certainly we've got those issues in the plan. Heat zone, working with colleagues, our sustainability officers, we have, I don't know about that specific point you mentioned, but we've certainly got a policy on it, but that's the proof is in the wording, isn't it? Adopted streets. I'd have to check that one, but we absolutely have a policy on transport accessibility, all the things you'd expect. It's an interesting point. And then, yes, student college accommodation, yes, we have a long policy on those issues as well. So I think the short answer is I hope most of these issues will be covered, but it's useful to get a prelude of the sort of points you'll be looking into. Thank you.
Can I just say, for the adoptable streets, it's quite often up to the local authority, actually, because adoptable open spaces, there's some local authorities who don't want to adopt certainly open spaces. So we're going to go to Trumi Hawkins and then to Anna Bradman. Yep. And then we're going to finish in the room, and then we're going to go to the online members.
Thanks. Mine is quite a quick one. I think I have been mentioning multicultural living, not multicultural, multi-generational living. Is that covered in any of the homes policy?
It is. We've tried to look at it in a variety of ways, yes. It's been an interesting one to explore because we understand the issue, but it's not necessarily a straightforward one to deal with in planning. So it will be interesting to see what members think of our solution to how we've covered those issues in the plan.
So we have Anna Bradnam and then Councillor Williams, and then we'll go to online.
Thank you. I apologise if this goes through a theme and then goes back again. I'm just following the papers through. So on the great places, I was looking at this referred to on page 21, new policy on skyline and tall buildings. When you look at the detail, it tends to refer to skyline and tall buildings in the city. And I just wanted to check that there's something about not necessarily having, for example, gateway or landmark buildings in rural locations, because they're really not very appropriate. And instead that sort of feathering in rather than announcing yourself in rural locations. And a link to the landscape and the street scene, not just, and I know that there's a reason for having this, and it's important that we have it, but just so that it doesn't end up being used in rural locations as well, unless we actually want it to be. Obviously, where we've got new developments like Northstowe or Cambourne or Waterbeach Newtown, there may be locations where it is appropriate to have a landmark navigational building. But for example, on the edge of a village, it is not necessarily appropriate to have a, quote, gateway building. Right. The next one I wanted to pick up was on page 25, we're talking about climate change policies, and there's all these policies deal with sustainability with regard to water and other things. What I wanted to check here is whether there is a hook that enables us as a planning authority not to have to give permission for planning applications where we are not sure that there is sufficient water supply. Now, I know this is a Anglian water thing, and you know, we know the difficulties we're having over this, but I do not want us to be forced into a, you know, that we have no powers to say no because it's elsewhere in policy and that's for somebody else to deal with. So I just want to be sure that we have sufficient powers to handle that. I know Tumi's saying no, but I just want to ask that question. The third thing I wanted to ask about is on page 27, the policy on providing and enhancing open spaces. And I wanted to check whether we have any way, you know, because we often can only make provision for green space when we are developing. And actually what I wanted to check is, do we have any way of protecting and ring fencing areas for green space in the absence of development? So where we want, I'll give you an example, and it's partisan because it's where I am, but for example, between the villages of Milton, Landbeach and Waterbeach, there is green space, it's all County Farms land, but, you know, when we have a lot of pressure on development, less now in following the recent decision, but where we have pressure on development, is there any way we can actually ring fence an area for green space, for example? That's just an example. Where we might want to have new open green space. It's not open at the moment, it's all farmland, but we might want to protect it for that purpose. The fourth thing I wanted to raise is on the same page but lower down. It's policy WSCF, community sports and leisure facilities. Do we have a way of gathering together cumulative contributions from a number of developments to provide for expensive infrastructure, like, for example, swimming pools or a cinema or, you know, in developments? So just, I'll ask that question. Right. Yes, the other one was just a little bit of South Camsness here. Page 31 on policy JPB, protecting existing business space, and it says aims to preserve business space from being lost to other uses unless this change is justified. Now, I know this is, I spoke to John about this before the meeting, and I understand this is because there's a particular need in the city, but I also just wanted to point out that there are times when we need to protect commercial and business space in our villages as employment sites. And so it's just that the wording of that needs to be, you know, applies a more site-specific approach to protecting industrial land in Cambridge, fine, and in South Cambs. Because there might be places where we recognise that there's a value in having employment in that location. Just a thought which I also mentioned to John beforehand. I think there might be another typo on page 32, second paragraph, where we're talking about faculty development and specialist language schools, which is clearly to do with Cambridge mainly, sets out when these forms of development will be permitted within the city centre of Cambridge, full stop, or not the university. Cambridge development will be permitted when the public realm is not negatively impacted. But I think there's an extra word there. It's not the university, it's Cambridge. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam.
And actually, that's a good point. There might be reasons to have specialist language schools in South Cambs as well. So, you know, so just those thoughts.
Just also, the current local plan for the city has an existing tall building policy. So it's new for South Cambs, but not amended for the city.
There's a lot to go through there. One of the challenges we've got with this plan, what's the challenge? One of the opportunities we've got with this plan is that this is the first joint local plan for the area, and we've got 2 plans from 2018 which need updating. They've got particular style approaches and so on. What we've got to do is come together with a single plan for the area to make policies work for the whole area. We've got to respond to perhaps some new style guidance in the direction travel government are taking with how these plans are structured and so on. So it's been a really interesting challenge for our team to try and pull together a whole new plan where some councils have the lovely opportunity to say, I'll just roll forward that policy and that policy. This is a whole new plan. So really looking forward to sharing it with you. In terms of the great places policies on design, I hope there's a lot in there for every location. We'll cover landscape, we'll cover rural places, but as we said, we have got a particular challenge in the city regarding tall buildings. We responded to that, but the plan really does also need to cover village environments and connection with landscape as well. I hope it does. On climate change, yes, we have a policy on water, including looking at water resource efficiency and so on. Any refusal of the committee would have to be based on evidence and so on. That's the only caveat. I know committee members know all of that. Has to be based on evidence of those issues.
There's nowhere in the wording.
Councillor Bradnam, can we just
to clarify that point? There's nowhere that refers to water supply. Is the point I was saying.
Appreciate it. It's just a summary. We've thrown together a couple of lines. I think we're trying to show there's lots of things that don't come out of the detail of this, but I completely take on board your point. Open space. There's a lot in the plan about open space, green infrastructure, including enhancing the green infrastructure network we've talked about previously during plan making. When you get into the issues about, protecting certain, say, a village wanting to extend a recreation ground or so on, whilst we can allocate specific sites and so on, it's all about then demonstrating it's deliverable, which can be quite challenging, having dealt with these issues over the years. I would say one of the best approaches a village could have, where it's not sort of related to development, would be neighbourhood planning. A number of our neighbourhood plans have looked at open space protection, enhancement, new space and so on. I think it's a really effective way of doing it. Protecting business space. So, completely agree. Nothing has gone away from the importance of protecting village employment spaces. They're still a scarce resource. The plan will need to protect them carefully. What you'll see our draft plan has responded to is the evidence that we've prepared and published on the key sectors and the industry and warehouse needs, which showed a particular issue of pressure on those industrial estate type spaces in Cambridge. So we've taken a slightly different approach in the city by drawing on that and identifying some specific spaces, but it's not intended to undermine the overall importance of protecting employment space and having a list of circumstances, specific circumstances when they've been marketed or when they're causing a problem and so on. So we're not really going to move away from that approach in the draft plan. Typos, not surprised. Hopefully we'll pick them all up, and with your help we'll pick them up. The gathering together community infrastructure needs, so the plan will be accompanied by an infrastructure delivery plan and various other specialist bits of evidence, such as we are updating the sporting facilities needs study following the Sport England methodology, the playing pitch strategy, and so on. Building on actually the work we've done, currently consulting on the Sector 106 SPD, actually, for a plug for that consultation that's going on. Absolutely, it will be about how do we gather up funds to deliver the infrastructure that the community needs as a whole, and that could include pooling funds together to contribute towards wider facilities. So yes, absolutely agree with that. That's something the plan needs to do.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
We have Councillor Williams.
There we go. Thank you. Just a few things. Multi-generational living, it's something that I literally practice what I preach. My poor husband has 3 generations of women to nag him. My mother, my daughter, and myself. So perhaps he could feed into that consultation at the pain it can cause him. But it is a real thing, and it is something, you know, part of the reason we took the decision to do 2 houses to one is because it's so expensive to live here. And so actually, you know, even though we get more homes, multi-generational living is actually quite common in my village. We're not the only people that are doing it. Several families do. And if not, they're sort of like next door, you know. And actually, we should be selling the benefits of that for the care system as well. For my husband's grandmother literally lived next door. My father-in-law was a builder. He's now in his 80s. Literally built his house in the garden back in the 60s. And when Sean's nan was ill and getting elderly, lived to 96, there was people on hand. She never had to go into a care home because her family was there with her. So when we talk about multi-generational living, yes, it's about affordability, but actually how we can take pressure off of other systems by having that natural caring resource that lots of people would love to do, but geography gets in the way. Also on landmark, please, landmark does not have to be huge and tall. Landmark buildings, it infuriates me. I've seen some beautiful landmark buildings. Actually, it could be really small or completely round. There's lots of things that can make something a landmark. It doesn't, and can we please make sure we encourage that, so developers don't just think, oh, we'll whack a couple of extra floors on, and then we'll call it, was it gateway or landmark? Maybe if you want a gateway, let's build a sort of marble arch sort of thing. Neighbourhood planning is great, but not everywhere has the resource to do it. One of my parishes doesn't even have a precept, let alone these things, and some of them aren't even parish councils, they're meetings. So we need to make sure that there is some sort of provision in place for those that can't do things like neighbourhood plans. The village design statements were a great way actually of trying to do that. And we talk a lot about neighbourhood plans, less about village design statements now, and I'd like to see that profile lifted if possible through this process. But I do sort of share that it's great to have the summary and what have you, but I think it's naturally, we're all interested in planning, we want something to get our teeth into, we like the nitty-gritty, we like the detail. Now, in the past, when environmental policies have been coming through, there has been I know I mentioned this last time, at least in South Cambs, it may work differently in the city, a joint scrutiny and CEAC, well, Climate Environment Advisory Group, came together for a meeting, and I think that was really effective. And I'll make the same suggestion I did. I don't know if it made progress. I think in having a joint sort of planning and scrutiny meeting, we get the skill sets of both us who are implementing it month in, month out, but also the benefits of the scrutiny members and the skill sets they have. And actually they will look at things, if you're not in planning, you're outside the bubble. So I know that was going to be looked into. I don't know if that's a possibility, but I think it really, there was some overlap. I know Councillor Bradnam's on scrutiny and Richard Williams from my group is, but I think that would be better than because time's probably not going to allow for, which I would generally prefer as well.
Thank you. Jonathan, are you going to pick that up?
Or
Heather?
Yeah, I think we've encouraged that the chair of both scrutinies can invite the JPAG members, and we would actively encourage that. I think you're right, Councillor Williams. It's timing. You know, we're quite short of time, so we need to sequence all of the meetings in. It would be very difficult to try and arrange a separate joint scrutiny, but as there are already dates in the diary, I think we would encourage chairs to invite JPAG members. I think you can give a valuable contribution there. So thank you.
I think would that be up to the scrutiny chairs?
So I'm chair of, we have two scrutiny in Cambridge. One is climate, one is overseeing the local plan. The proposal is that we would involve both for that, but any member can also attend, and I think we definitely encourage planning members and JPLAG members to come along because they can speak with permission of the chair. So as long as they let us know in advance, that's something, because like you say, it needs to be, we're on a tight timescale. We need to have as many voices. And I think, yeah, my main concern is there's a strategic thing to look at, but then there's also the really detailed stuff that some of the planners will want to get their heads around as well.
I think we're going to the online committee members, and then we'll come back to the room. So we'll have, first we'll have Martin Kahn.
Hello, yeah, the question that I was going to look at now is the issue of, particularly in the rural areas or outside the city, of the loss of small houses rather than flats. There's one thing I've noticed is that everybody wants to increase the size, build on extensions to 1 or 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom houses, and we're losing entry level houses in the villages. The provision of small properties is not being made. People don't build new small bungalows. There's not, so it's a real problem in terms of the balance of housing in villages. And I don't know how you might, it doesn't seem to be covered in the policies you've got. I just wondered how that might be taken into consideration. I think one needs to think about this, because I think I see it as a real problem. It's probably also a problem in some of the suburbs of Cambridge, not in perhaps in the centre, but where it's the density of development might make it less likely. The question I would pose is: do we want to lose all our small properties in villages and in towns, apart from those provided by affordable housing obligations, which is probably where the main provision is now, in rental accommodation? Where will our grandparents who are not going to go to a care home, where will they downsize to? How do people enter into buying a house rather than going to, into the market with small properties, which is a starting element? So I see it as a problem, and I don't quite know how one tackles it in planning terms, because under the current policies, if it meets the requirements, it's up to the market to sort it out, and we will continue losing smaller properties.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Do you want to come back on that?
And part, I was thinking as well during your question about how almost all relates to intergenerational living, because part of it is being able to extend in many ways to respond to your housing needs going forward. So there's a really delicate balance here. And I get the ultimate answer, I guess, we have is that we keep up to date our information regarding housing mix. So another study we're doing is updating information on housing mix, and we have the council's joint housing strategy where it explores these issues to make sure that houses are going forward responds to, let's say, the live needs of places when you bring forward new houses. But I think that control over existing houses is very difficult, because you also want to provide flexibility if an extension is appropriate. Helps meet the housing needs in itself, then you don't want to restrict that. So it is a difficult challenge, I agree.
Thank you. We'll have Councillor Bennett now.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention 2 points. One is about river corridors, because we've had quite a lot of work on that in Abbey, from the Riverside Vision Group, from CamCycle, and from our largest residents association, RARA. And I understand that they have fed in some proposals into the river corridors policy already, and this is a very popular policy locally, and I just wondered how much of what they proposed is going into that. And secondly, I'm really sorry for being so parochial. I wanted to raise another Abbey issue, which is policy JPB, protecting existing business space. We have a lot of intermediate and warehouse, a lot of space that's designated as intermediate and warehousing business space in Abbey. But that ship has really sailed. Very little of it is actually being used for warehousing. And the little that remains is a source of friction because we have large housing estates built up right next to it. Could we have a proper look at that policy and on a site-by-site basis and consider whether, that is a plug that needs to be pulled or a policy that needs to be strengthened? Because at the moment we have neither one thing or the other. We don't have preservation of intermediate B2B space, and we don't have a great living environment for the residential areas that abut to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Good question. So I hope the River Corridor policy addresses a number of issues which will be helpful and relevant to the River Corridor in Cambridge. Obviously, you haven't seen the wording of that, but I hope this picks up a number of relevant issues. And obviously, there'll be a chance for all the groups you mentioned to comment on that policy, whether they think it does or it doesn't, through the consultation. Sorry, do you want to come in?
So I was just going to say, I recognise that point that the groups did send in those particular points, and we looked through those points line by line to think about whether they were right to include in the policy. So just to confirm that we have looked at those.
Much better answer than mine, thank you, Stuart. And then I fully take on board that interesting issue about the industrial sites. So we have looked site by site at those issues, and I appreciate some of the issues about the co-location of industry and housing. It does come up, and that's to an extent referenced in current policies as well. But on those issues you're familiar with on a site-specific level, this is some of your very specific examples. Again, I would say the plan will be out. The consultant would be really interested in opinions back from people that are affected by those particular sites. So it sounds like that might be something that your community would want to comment on through the consultation if they take a different view about what's been put in. But that's why we consult, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. We'll have Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. I just was looking at this policy on page 35, and I appreciate it's a summary. Policy IDT, the Digital and Telecommunications Infrastructure Policy, outlines how development should contribute to Greater Cambridge's telecommunication infrastructure. And the note I wrote, it must not be in cycle routes. It's simply that, utility companies are entitled to install in the highway. So whether we have, because that's where most of the utilities are, the water and sewage network, electricity, network fibre, all that kind of thing. They tend to be in the highway and sometimes also in the footway. But can we put something in the policy? Because we've worked hard to get improvements to cycle infrastructure, only to find that Cambridge Fibre, our well-known friend, has installed unexpectedly telecommunications boxes in the cycleway that has just been improved. And I have made a big fuss about those, and they have been moved. So, the point being, if it was recognised, you know, and they haven't argued back and said, no, Councillor Bradnam, I don't have to move it. If they've recognised that they are obliged to move it, why didn't they think about that in the first place? Incidentally, we also had infrastructure installed on Waterbeach Village Green, which is a registered green village green. And they argued the toss with me, saying, we're entitled to install there. And I said, no, you're not. And after a huge fight with them, and I dragged them around a long journey around the entire village, offering them alternative sites for this hub, we did find another site. They accepted another site. Now, I'm thinking, why can we not make the infrastructure providers a little bit more responsible towards existing infrastructure and protected spaces?
And I know that one problem is the legislation for utility companies has been strengthened in their favour. So, and it's whether it's considered development or not, but I'll pass you over to Jonathan.
Thank you. That's almost what I was thinking. I was thinking, how much control do we have in it? Because there's so much things like prior approval and those things in this area, which is not my area of expertise. So I think, can we say something? I have to take it back. But the whole reasoning of this policy is developers need to think about it up front. They need to plan in this sort of infrastructure. So the main thrust of this policy is expecting developers of those big sites to come to you with a strategy how they're going to get digital into the structure of the place up front. That's why we put it in.
In particular, just things like, you may all be familiar with the boxes for digital infrastructure, which appear sort of apparently overnight in footways. In some places, that's fine. In other places, it's a real hazard. We've had them installed on the side of a cycleway, which is broadly speaking unlit. In other words, if somebody was cycling along there at night, they could easily just hit it and they wouldn't realise it was there.
We understand. We'll look into it, but it's a very, very tricky one. Yeah. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the officers producing 70 policies. That's quite an achievement, and introducing new ones as well. Particularly, I think, with the restrictions that the government's introduced on policy development, not the replication of policies that are in the national policy framework. We'll see how far you get away with that when it comes to the examination. A few of my bête noirs, build to rent, and how that collides with the policy on, I think this is the housing mix policy type and size, and the that's H/HM, and the affordable housing provision of H/AH. Government introduced build to rent to essentially bring a new source of finance capital into house building, and it's very much financial institutional led, and they want big size investments, big block of investment, big investment size. And so the problem with that is you're getting this mono-tenure development that cuts right across those other two policies, the mix and the mixed tenure. And we've seen this in House Green, where there was a development for 293 build-to-rent flats, with only 20% is deemed to be affordable, but there's only a 20% discount to the market, which actually it's just not, they're not affordable to anybody that isn't on a really substantial salary. I think we've got to try and control this build to rent phenomenon, because it's destructive of a community, in my view. It's not creating a mixed community. On water, I'm just looking at water efficiency. I mean, there's no reference there to water recycling, and I think this is going to be absolutely essential if we're going to achieve the reduced consumption per person per day. And I think that has to be in here somewhere, somehow. I'm not going to tell you how. You're the expert on this. On policy CC/DC, Designing for Changing Climate, you refer to a number of measured ways in which you can reduce the heat island effect, but I don't think you mentioned materials. And that's actually very important, and you can ask the chair of this meeting, because she's an expert on that. I think some of the development failures we've seen across the sub-region, I'll cite Northstowe, is that the housing went ahead, but way before the social infrastructure was introduced. I would really want to just pick up Councillor Pora's point on this. If we're going to make great places, one of the 7 objectives, then we do have to make sure that the new housing developments have both advanced and phased infrastructure. Eddington is a exemplar for that. Huge upfront investment. We can't expect the speculative developers to do that, but I think they are actually stretching the point. And we need to see these thresholds, and we need to see them enforced as well. And that's a very difficult point. And then lastly, there are 2 really good policies in the Cambridge Local Plan, policies 68 and 69. And these are the ones that relate to the protection of designated nature reserves. When the area around the buffer zone is not recognised, that the buffer zone around a designated nature reserve is exceptionally important to protection of the ecosystem in that nature reserve. And we've had controversial planning applications where development has come very, very close to the boundary of the designated nature reserve. We know that it harms nature, but we need a strong policy to prevent these kinds of incursions upsetting these really critical pieces of biodiversity that we have. And I'm not seeing something that was a very, very tightly specified policy about this is what you're going to have to do if you're going to demonstrate no harm. The onus was on the developer rather than on the local planning authority. And I really won't want to see us having this local plan weakening those really useful policies. The fight has actually been over the amount of, there's been disagreement between us about the weight to be attached to that policy and the way it's actually applied as being sort of really difficult points between us on a couple of occasions.
So those points have been made to the officers who deal with biodiversity, because it's now moved from the city officers to the shared planning officers. So I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Yes, the built to rent policy has to grapple with not only the affordable level, but the discount level. And one of the things we're informing the policy approach with is a new viability assessment in order to help demonstrate what might be, and often it will be a balance between those 2 things as well. It's not just because they work together. But I have very much worked with the housing teams on that, well, all the housing policies, to be honest, but building on the joint housing strategy. Water recycling, interesting one. So, the short answer is yes, we need a strong water efficiency standard. And one of the things the Water Scarcity Group very much has been grappling with is a package of wider measures across the area, but also the application of standards. Interestingly, the consultation on new building regulations started about 2 weeks ago and is seeking views on these very issues. And I believe our building control team are leading on that particular response, but very much picking up on the importance of water efficiency from our perspective, because the east of England is going to continue to be under water pressure, water supply pressure, and the starting point has to be make the most of it in the built environment. So should be responding to that, but also proposing a strong policy approach on that issue. Materials, yes. Embodied carbon and so on is in there. Yeah. Timing, yes. We will always try and put the right hooks in policy. The practicality of dealing with it can be challenging, but planning committee members know that more direct than I. And then the green spaces policies have been worked out very carefully. I'm looking at Stuart because he's very much led on those, but worked out very much with our officers working on those. So I'd hope they cover off the issues as you'd expect. I'm sure we'll be talking about them in due course.
Thank you very much. I have one question. One is, my understanding is that for when we go to the consultation, after the consultation, no further sites can be added. But is that the same for policies as well? Once we go to consultation, we will not be in a position to add any further policies.
No, you can make changes to the plan. So eventually the next step would clearly be our Reg 19 plan. Obviously the benefit is having done consultation, you can build up to that point, but you can make changes up to a Reg 19 plan because we need to be clear this is a genuine consultation. Yes. That as members will see in the consultation, there are still areas where we think we have a direction of travel and we want feedback on and we want to do further work. So this is very much a consultation. We want feedback on the policy sites and so on to build on that. We still want to do a lot of engagement with members into next year, shaping that submission plan, making sure it's as sound as that can be before you get to submission. So we very much want to hear from people on sites, policies and everything in it to help us shape it towards Reg 19.
That's great. So just also really like to thank the team for doing particularly the second stage, which is this high level document about the policies, because that was a request at the last meeting and you pulled it forward, and we really appreciate that. So I think actually if we have no further questions and comments, I'll bring this meeting to a close. And to thank everybody for attending, and I hope you get back safely, and we'll meet again soon, I expect. Thank you very much.